Hey yo everyone! Halo 2 Rebalance is now just 2 missions away from completion, so buckle up because we're fast approaching the light at the end of the tunnel, after years of working on one of the biggest Halo mods ever made. Halo's mission design has always been predominantly carried by the core 4 characters of the Covenant enemy roster, that being the Grunts, Jackals, Elites, and Hunters. With Halo 2 though, Bungie sought to greatly expand this list of characters to build bigger levels through a greater number of tools under their belt to create encounters, introducing the Barbaric Brutes and the Swarming Drones to the Covenant cast, along with using the existing characters in new ways, such as the Elite Ranger and Sniper Jackal. Now, given this video's subject, the first thing on your mind may be, Ruby, what did you do to fix the evil Sniper Jackals? Well, that's something we've gone into in length in previous episodes of this design series. To put it short, thanks to a combination of factors, the Sniper Jackals have been reeled in to be much more fair to fight against. Thanks to overhauling the difficulty and damage framework and fine-tuning their aiming, these enemies will no longer one-shot the player. The intent being, once you've been hit, you have that room to find their position and swiftly retaliate before they can line up their next shot. Beyond that, we're going to go into the culprits behind some of Halo 2's worst and least fun missions, in my opinion, and see what we can do to refine them into entities much more interesting, fun, and fair to fight against, while also staying true to and fleshing out their characterization. Be sure to subscribe to stay updated on this mod's progress, and help bring it over the finish line by giving this video a like and chipping in on my Patreon. Halo 2 was always created with the idea that the player would take control of an elite character, which would become the Arbiter we all know and love, bringing another perspective to the Covenant and seeing how they work from the inside. In wanting players to be able to sympathize with the Arbiter and Elites, the Brutes were created to fill the role of an antagonistic rival faction within the Covenant that would be even easier to hate. That need for an extra evil antagonist then informed the type of character and gameplay role they'd fill. The Brutes are violent, ruthless aliens who are even more drunk on the Prophet's lies than the rest of the Covenant, leading to the creation of a huge, bulky, and very dangerous character to face in gameplay, who will drop their weapon and go into a berserking rage upon being the last man standing, boasting immense strength with feral agility when enraged. Now, like many things in Halo 2, it's a great concept and one with a lot of potential, but it always comes down to the execution, and as we've seen time and time again, Halo 2's rush development always rears its ugly head in the most pivotal stages. Halo 2's Brutes, to put it bluntly, are overly spongy characters who practically nullify 70% of this game's sandbox. Even for the weapons that are nominally effective against them, they're still not fun to fight thanks to their lack of any sort of interesting reaction animations or visual feedback to being shot. They're rather dull to fight, with their only standout being the dynamics their berserk state brings to combat, which conveys their character very well and makes for very intense, adrenaline-filled moments in gameplay. And due to Halo 2's plot structure, wherein the Brutes usurp the Elite's roles as leaders of the Covenant, this enemy type almost completely dominates the last 4 missions of this game, consequently turning the last third of Halo 2 into a difficult and very dull slog to play. Bungie was very aware of the lack of polish this late game enemy received and the ramifications they had on gameplay, and made it a point to better flesh out and polish the Brutes for Halo 3, especially since they would dominate the entire game as the leader enemy archetype for the Covenant. In turning a critical eye inward and pushing for polish and refinement, Halo 3's Brutes came out being a significantly better designed enemy than their 2 counterparts. Much more reasonable vitality balancing, much more interesting reactions to damage, and many more ranks that allow encounters to utilize interesting enemy compositions. However, there is something to be said about how the Brutes in 3 seem to lose a bit of their edge from Halo 2. They certainly don't come off as nearly intimidating, much less the immediate danger they were before up close. So all this laid out, what kind of approach do we take if we want to improve upon Halo 2's Brutes? Well, let's start by taking all of these same lessons Bungie learned, many of their refinements Halo 3 made, and carry them back into Halo 2, while identifying what Halo 2's Brutes did right, their intimidation and immediate threat factor, and essentially pick and choose the best qualities of both games' renditions to create a character that is ideally the best of both worlds. The first step, obviously, will be rebalancing their ridiculous health values. The Brutes need to be bulky enough to give them their own unique attribute over the Elites, but not so much that it shuts down anything other than a headshot or heavy weapon. We'll give them a resistance to standard melee damage to discourage reckless boxing matches with the behemoths, bolstering their threat up close, but still have them take extra damage from special melees such as the Needler, heavy weapons, or the Brute Shot, providing the player with tools to deal with them up close if need be. Next, with the work of our animator Echo 482, we'll lift some of the biggest animation improvements Halo 3 made and backport them into Halo 2. Things like their hard ping animations to provide some much needed damage feedback, making them more inherently fun to shoot, unique and more readable stances for using rifles or heavy weapons, as well as a few custom animations like a more animalistic evasion, and fixing their very unfinished Berserk State's grenade throw. Among the Halo 2 animations we kept includes their fast and hard-hitting melee animations, which were suitably lethal and made you take extra caution before venturing up close, as well as their insane feral berserk animations, something far too important to their Halo 2 identity and gameplay dynamic to change, as opposed to Halo 3's berserk movement and melee animations, which are commonly criticized for being significantly slower and a much less present threat. Once in a blue moon, we take some inspiration from the post-Bungie Halo games for their gameplay ideas. In this case, Halo Infinite introduced a unique gameplay dynamic to the Brute, where brutes can spawn unarmed and will relentlessly rush the player to pummel you down. So, what would this concept look like if we adapted it into Halo 2? While the Halo 3 berserk animations were rather underwhelming compared to 2's, what if we repurposed that animation state to be their unarmed combat animations, while still being capable of going into that classic full Halo 2 style berserk upon being the last man standing? This unique state will open up opportunities to build encounters around the idea of unarmed brutes surrounding and rushing the player, further conveying their brutal, merciless nature and lending us even more ways to utilize this character. With these refinements using the lessons learned from future installments, that already goes a long way toward making Halo 2's final act a lot more enjoyable to play. But like I said, as this part of the game goes on, the brutes become more and more dominant in encounters before, eventually, almost every fight consists purely of brutes. Innately fun gameplay interaction is one thing, but if the brutes are going to be the backbone of 4 entire missions, we're going to need to add a serious splash of diversity among their ranks to keep things from getting monotonous. The vanilla Halo 2 brutes were all practically the same look and behavior, with the only notable distinctions being the captain, who have their cool little holographic red flag, but otherwise function exactly the same as the standard brute, and the honor guard, whose only unique attribute is immunity to headshots. So we'll apply the same approach as before, looking to what improvements future games made to the brutes while maintaining the unique edge of the Halo 2 rendition. First, let's take the minor and major brutes who are indistinguishable from one another and give them a much more readable difference in body and armor color, giving the brute major a smoky gray hide and black fur color, inspired by one of the brute renders seen in the 2004 Halo art book. Here's a fun or annoying fact depending on how you look at it. The brute majors in vanilla actually have lower health than the minors. I have no idea if this was intentional and if it was, what they were going for with that, but it makes more sense to me to keep things simple and grant the majors more resilience than the minors. In this case, the same level of health, but with a higher hard ping threshold, i.e. a notably higher resistance to being staggered, stunned, etc. The brutes have also seen a huge polish pass to their models thanks to our artist Paddy, adding on little cut details to their design and further refining their look. In the vanilla game, brutes could upgrade dynamically into the captain rank if the encounter allowed for them to do so. Let's instead see if we can carve out for the brute captain a more distinct role in encounters and visual profile to make them truly stand out. Starting with their design, Paddy has taken the time and care to give them a rendition of their recognizable and distinct armor designs as seen in future games in the Halo 2 style, giving them their own striking and unique look and also conveying them beginning to transition over to the more serious, heavily armored getup seen in 3. On gameplay terms, it'll greatly benefit the captain's role to give them energy shields so that we may ensure plasma weapons retain a prominent role to fulfill in these late game brute dominant encounters, while granting the captains a distinct buff over the common brutes who will remain unshielded. Unlike Halo 3 though, the captain's armor will not explode upon the shields being drained. Instead, we've made it so every single armor piece can be shot off individually once their shields have been dropped, including their helmet, which must be blown off to make them vulnerable to headshots, from smaller arms anyway. Next, let's carve out more distinct encounter roles for the standard brutes and captains to play in. Standard brutes will be used more in packs and pile on the numbers and pressure as they push the player. Playing more like raw muscle, the player can easily outsmart and outplay so long as they respect their raw point-blank lethality and berserk state. Captains, though, will be designed as the more cunning but equally lethal leader of the pack, hanging back with their brute shots, or on occasion heavy weaponry, to pound at the player from range while his men close the distance. In addition to that, the captain will see much more deliberate use as leaders of Grunt and Jackal squads, so that we have more combinations of squad types to fuel Halo's 30 seconds of fun. The Grunts, and to a lesser extent Jackals, famously flee when their elite squad leader is killed, but in vanilla Halo 2, despite Grunts being used in conjunction with brute leaders in encounters, Grunts do not respond to brutes being killed at all. Well, I've fixed that now so Grunts will properly panic upon the killing of their brute captain, restoring that key dimension to gameplay for these last 4 missions. Should the squad of a brute captain fall though, and he's left the last man standing, the captain will of course enter the berserk state, but unlike standard brutes, the captain will not drop his weapon, keeping it on him as he charges you head on, still capable of using it should you be out of the range of his fury. That then brings us to the brute honor guard. As covered in a previous episode, the elite honor guards have seen a fresh gameplay pass to give them their own distinct flavor to fight, their helmets blocking headshots but able to be shot off, them predominantly using the fleshed out and fully usable energy stave, giving them a longer reach to melees, and lobbing plasma grenades as they close the distance with their target. All of those gameplay dynamics have likewise been given to the Brute honor guards. Their helmets can now be shot off along with the rest of their armor pieces, and their berserk while holding the energy stave is especially dangerous now, akin to that of a charging bull. Halo 2 established that the Brutes have a penchant for hoarding the weapons and equipment of their conquered enemies, in this case stealing and keeping human weapons as trophies, even wielding them for fun in select cases. So for the cherry on top, let's expand upon this concept and use it to build select encounters featuring Brutes using all manner of human weapons and frag grenades, not only shaking things up from the norm, but also acting as a great way to represent human weapons in the game's final act, where in vanilla they became extremely scarce or even completely absent.
They're using human weapons? Have they no shame?
And thanks to the work of tuning the Marines to work as both allies and enemies, as covered in the last episode, we can ensure human weapons remain balanced to fight against. All of these refinements and distinctions to the ranks of the Brutes will be a huge boon in lending the encounters of these last 4 missions a much better sense of gameplay structure for players to play around, and hopefully function as an exciting build-up to what's coming in Halo 3. Now we come to the drones, the second major enemy type Halo 2 brought to the table. Flying bugs wielding small arms that, while intended as weak individually, come in giant swarms that attack from multiple angles to overwhelm. This is definitely an enemy concept I can get behind, but the execution missed the mark by a bit. For as large of numbers that they come in, a single drone tanks way too much damage before dying. This is something Halo 3 fixed by cutting their health in half. So H2R similarly dialed their vitality in, which also justifies us to place them in larger swarms, opening up more opportunities to mow them down with weapons like the SMG, like you should be able to. Halo Reach added a feature where you could blow the drones to gibs by landing a headshot, lending some extra depth and inherent satisfaction to fighting an otherwise very simple enemy. So with the help of team member Luna, we've replicated that feature in H2R. Drones will explode upon not only being headshotted, but also from heavy damage strikes like from melee, explosions, or the sniper rifle. Halo 3 ODST decided to give the drones a huge glow up in implementing several different ranks, and I do mean several, like 6 of them. While I do think that's kind of overkill, this kind of diversification all the same can go a long way for a simple enemy like the drone. So let's add a couple new variants to Halo 2. First is the Drone Major, preferring to use the Needler, where minor drones will prefer the Plasma Pistol. Second is the Drone Captain, sporting a small layer of energy shields and always appearing with the Brute Plasma Rifle. This rank usually appears one at a time, leading swarms of lower ranking drones, where killing the captain will often cause the rest of the drones to instantly fall back and put them on the defense. Now, it's one thing to fine-tune the drone vitality and diversify their ranks, all of that is well and good, but equally important is how the drones are used in encounters. Far too often in vanilla, drone encounters consist of them spawning above or behind the player at very arbitrary triggers, in spaces where the player has almost no recourse before they're swarmed and overwhelmed. This is an incredibly aggravating, frustrating, and frankly unfair way of utilizing these enemies. Once again, Halo 3 learned from these mistakes and course-corrected. There, drones will always emerge from one central location in clear view of the player, or their spawns will be telegraphed in some way like through dialogue, giving the player time to react before swarming and dispersing around the space, in which typically the player is given many more viable positions to fight from. The drones typically won't spawn all at once either, the encounters preferring to trickle them in gradually as the initial batches are thinned out. H2R takes all of these improvements and retroactively applies them to the drone encounters of Halo 2, redesigning their spawn timings, placements, and combat positions to build much more reasonably reactive encounters that play much better into the fun of their role as big swarms of gooey bugs you can mow down and blow up while staying mobile. In addition, drones in Halo 2 were designed with the ability to perch upon walls, giving them more ways to position than just flying around wildly. However, the perching system in Halo 2 is heavily flawed and will not work unless the surface is a near perfect 90-degree angle. So many spaces where the encounter designers intended the drones to be able to perch, they just can't. H2R has gone through all of the drones' firing points in all of their encounters to ensure every perch spot works correctly so that this behavior can be utilized as intended. And for an extra touch, Echo 482 has backported the drone's bat-like upside-down sleeping animations from ODST, so now they can be meaningfully used in stealth-viable encounters. Now, I had planned to talk about the Flood this episode because, believe me, they really need to be discussed, and the huge number of things we've done with them, but the Flood are still missing one important element which naturally will see attention as I move on to the second to last mission of Halo 2 and the final Flood level, High Charity. So let me know what kind of changes or additions you most want to see out of the Flood, because next time we're going to have a lot to talk about. Meanwhile, we're going to keep powering along. H2R is fast approaching completion and I couldn't be more excited. So if you want to keep us trekking, head over to my Patreon and chip in, like all these lovely folks here. Your support really is what gives me the luxury of continuing to work on these mod projects full time, so any support there is greatly appreciated. We'll be back with more H2R content before you know it, but for now, peace and love.